Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Nope Coach podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Kohlberg. This is episode 256, Doorknob Confessions with Laura Gates Lupton. So, many moons ago, I was going to be a doctor. And
That's a telling laugh, Suzanne.
yeah, as you know, it's funny. When you're training, when you're a medical student, you do a lot of the stuff that doctors do under supervision. And I remember one day I was saying something about stitches that I'd done. And my mother-in-law was like, well, my mother-in-law to be, because we weren't married when I was at medical school, but she was like, they let you practice on real people? And I was thinking to myself, well, no, you graduate having watched it and you just magically know what to do. I was like, yes, there's consent and you ask the patient and they have permission to say no, but it's amazing how many people are just like, yeah, go practice on someone. So, and I much prefer that. I don't know, different systems I've heard about things around the world are very different. Like they wait till the patient's passed out in surgery and then they put the medical students on them. And I was like, to me, that's like, there's no consent there. Now, I don't want to put the fear of life in people who are listening, but in Australia, at least, it's when they're awake and they're fully consenting. But anyway, all this to say, I was saying to you one time when we were chatting about how, I don't know what medical appointments are like over there, but in Australia, when you go see your general practitioner, your GP, you usually have no more than 15 minutes. Sometimes it's even faster. And so as a medical student, you'd sit in on the appointment and the person would come in and they'd prattle on about gosh knows what. And then as you're escorting them out, they go, oh, by the way, I got this lump on my breast or something like this. And you're like, you've buried the lead. And that is why doctors are often so far behind because people just don't get to the point. And you're like, Suzanne, that's called a doorknob confession because from your background in psychotherapy. So,
Yeah, very,
yes.
very common. You can spend a whole hour with a client and feel like you're chatting with your cousin or aunt or something. And then as they're going out the door, they say, oh, I forgot to tell you. And it's like, yeah, and literally they're hanging onto the doorknob as they say it, like that's
And
why
you're
it's called
like,
a
this,
doorknob.
this is a red flag. This is something we need to bring you back in for. And I guess what do you think, any suggestions for listeners? So I'm sure we've all done this. I know for me, there is that level of rapport, or if you're not familiar with the term, comfort. Like if I don't know a doctor and I've never met them, I'm not going to go in there and whip out a boob. Hey, I got a lump. So, ways that, especially if the practitioner, because some practitioners are really great at, building rapport and making you comfortable, and some are just clinical all the way through.
Right.
So,
Right.
ways that you could suggest that people, not bury the lead when they want to talk about what's going on.
Well, if there's a way to communicate it ahead of time, that can be really helpful, whether it's with the person who's taking the appointment, if they're willing to put it on the chart or whatever, or if you have a patient portal to be able to put in there, this is why I'm coming, I'm concerned about this. So that then hopefully the person you're seeing can help you bring it up if you're struggling to bring it up. That can be really helpful. I know in therapy,
Yes.
a lot of the times when people, like I worked in an agency and people went through a whole intake process, most of the time they would never tell the people in intake what they were really coming in for. So, you'd be sitting there trying to figure it out as they would drop a bombshell, well, actually, I had a child that died, or actually this happened, and it's nowhere on the intake form. But that's in part because of what you just said about the trust level. But especially if you're only going to have 15 minutes with somebody, it can be really helpful to let them know ahead of time what you're coming in for so that you can actually have that addressed. Because it also feels terrible to be the person who's leaving the appointment not having had the issue addressed.
Yes, 100%. And the other thing too, it's funny when you talk about intake forms. Very recently, I was looking for some help in, maximizing listenership for the podcast, getting in front of, new people. And I came across this person. Anyway, long story short, they had quite a detailed intake form. And, that this for any practitioners out there, put yourself on the receiving end of the person who has to fill this form in. That's just all I'm going to say. But anyway, it was quite detailed. It took me quite a long time to fill it all in. And then I got to the booking page. When we get on the call, it was very obvious to me that she hadn't read it. And that's why I was offset before we even began, because why make me, like it was required to fill in, there was the asterisks or you couldn't go past, because she kept saying, when we put your show out weekly, and I'm thinking, I got a daily show. And then a few other things about episode length. And I was like, oh, and the intro and outro. And I was thinking, you haven't read my form. So maybe, and this is something I'll take from this going forward when I go to somebody. So did you read my intake form? Otherwise, I will give them a moment because, you might think, oh, she's bossy or rude or taking charge. But if I'm investing time, energy, and money into getting the support that I need, you need to advocate for yourself. And, in that instance, I also didn't go on to hire them because, as I said, obviously they didn't pay attention. But I just found that like the intake form is a great suggestion, but yeah, it's not always read.
No, and as the person filling it out, you've already invested a lot of time. So having them, and I'm sure you probably did a great job of filling it out. You probably were thorough. You probably really explained things, hoping that they would help in the session, which is exactly what I was just suggesting, right? Like you share the
Yes.
stuff ahead of
Yeah,
time.
normally it is. And normally it's a great key, but sometimes it isn't. And
Yeah.
also, too, I think it depends, once again, on the person and the time. They might not have time to have reviewed it beforehand. A couple of times I haven't. Like, I will make a Sue's confession. But then when I get onto the call, I'll say to them, like, I have had back-to-back calls. I apologize. I'm just going to take a moment
Yes.
and let them grab tissues or water or a cup of tea or stretch their legs, or I don't know. Most people, we're frazzled, especially if we're going from call to call to call. So they appreciate it. And I think it's appreciated, that honesty. And I'm a speed reader, so I can skim it in no time. But I think
Yeah, I've
that
done that with email. Once I saw someone sent me an email, but I haven't had time to read it. I've said, can you hold on a second? I'd just like to read your email you just sent me so you don't have to repeat all that,
yeah,
like
and that's that,
nobody's
yeah,
ever said, no, I don't want you to.
repeating all that. Because the other thing that just comes to mind is whenever you ring a call center, like you have an issue with a service and they're like, what's your name? What's your date of birth? What's your address? Oh, I can't. I've got to transfer you through to this. And then every single person, you're like, seriously? Can you not? Like, I've answered this 6 times already. But back to the doorknob confessions thing, your first point about, if they have an intake form or a pre-form. The other thing too, if they don't have that, a thing that I use, I write down, like I use notes on my phone. What am I going in for? And if it's for like my general practitioner, sometimes I'm not proud to admit this, but I'll wait till I've got a few things because, oh, that's not that big of a deal. Oh, that's not that big a deal. If you do that, if you're like me, make sure you book a double or a triple appointment. Like, don't try and squeeze all in. It's not on them, the fact that you're not, making this a priority. So I will ring up and I'll be like, I need the longest appointment there is. Yes, I realize it's going to be more expensive. But then I have them listed because sometimes, if they do ask me, oh, how are the kids or how's this, and I get on a tangent, the reason I have the doorknob confession is because I forgot what I went in there for.
It's easy to walk out of there and think, oh no, I told them everything but the key issue.
Yeah, so have it written down, like pen and paper if you're old school, notes on your phone.
Yes.
It's like when you go to the supermarket. I can't be the only one who goes in for like eggs, comes out with like 6 things, no eggs. So
Yeah.
it's like, write it down. And I used to write it down, but never take my list. Now I use notes on my phone. There's no excuse. My phone is always with me because I usually need maps because I always get lost. So
Yeah, and I do think if you're working with a coach where you have communication in between sessions and something's going to be hard to bring up, like I always appreciate when my clients send me a message and say, hey, when I meet with you next, I want to talk about this. It's kind of hard for me to bring up, so I'm telling you now.
yes,
And
that's a
usually then
great
they have no
thing.
trouble bringing it up too, is I don't have to bring it up. It's usually just getting it out there in the first place is enough to.
Yeah, especially if you use like voice message support. I know that you do. I also use Voxer support. Sometimes people will bring something up offhandedly on Voxer, which I will laser in on and say, hey, let's bring that to the next session. And then I'll make a note. Because yeah, often it happens. Something is bothering us. And then we think, oh, I'm going to go and get the help or whatever. But then in the moment we go to get the help, it's not bothering us. So say you're like, my left knee aches at 10 o'clock at night and I can't sleep, or I don't know. And then you go to the doctor and it's daytime and it's, you're all distracted by all this other, there was a cute baby in the waiting room and whatever. And then you're like, oh, what am I here for? And you forget. So,
Yes.
if you have the list or if you, voice message with the coach, as you said, it's a less pressured environment. Like, what are we going to talk about today? I don't know.
Right.
Oh, remember, on the Voxer, you mentioned this. Yes. Because often the offhanded thing is like where a lot of the gold is.
That's why I love Voxer. I get so much. I feel like the work is so much deeper with clients because of the conversation we have in between sessions for exactly what you just said.
Yes, yes. No, I absolutely adore Voxer too. So I guess, pre-admission form, making your own notes. And the other thing too, and I don't know if this would help with it or not, but I use notes or I take pen and paper. If I'm going to use notes on my phone, I let them know. I'm not texting, I'm just taking notes. But if I go to a session with a coach or a doctor or wherever, in the moment they suggest, hey, go look at this or read this or here's an activity. As soon as I walk out the door, I have like a doorknob forget. My husband and I call it a doorway moment. You know, you're like, I'm going to go and make a cup of tea or put the jug on or set the dishwasher off. And then you walk out and you're like, why am I here? I don't know. You know, so it's like a doorway moment. So,
Yes.
you know, and like if you're working with a coach or whatever, like when I work a coach, I type everything. I'm like, I'm not randomly on Facebook. I'm typing notes so that I remember what to do or what they suggested, because you think, I don't know about you, but I say to myself, I won't forget that.
Oh. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I thought of something this morning that I wanted to tell you. Can I remember it now? Nope.
And then as soon as you get off, that's what you'll have your own doorway moment. You just walk
I
out to
will.
make a cup of tea, whatever, and you're like, oh yeah, we're going to chat about this.
Well,
So
thank God we have Boxer. I'll just reach out to you.
yes, to bring this all, like, you know, to a hopefully logical conclusion. Firstly, I want to normalize doorway confessions and doorway moments are totally a thing. Secondly, you know, make use of the intake form if they have one, and your own notes, whether pen and paper or on the thing, like, you know, what are you wanting to get from this? And then thirdly, after the session, appointment or whatever, either immediately or in the thing, if you're comfortable to, make some notes. And you could even do this with podcasts. I'm not ashamed to say when I listen to podcasts, I often will stop my walk, or I have pulled over the car before, or, you know, put down the groceries because I'm listening in the supermarket and go, oh, that's amazing. And I jot it down in notes on my phone, because we tell ourselves, I will remember that. And then we don't. And then we're like, which episode, which podcast, which person, and then we can't find it.
Yep, absolutely true for me too. I often listen to them while I'm cooking. It's like to like stop everything and write it down.
Yeah, turn the stove down or turn it off. You know,
Yeah.
write that down. Come on back. I love
Yes.
it. So thank you once again for joining me, Laura. Let the listeners know, what do you do and where can they find you?
I am a former psychotherapist. I have to say that since we talked about that. And a life and money coach now. And people can find me on LinkedIn.
Yep. So look up Laura on LinkedIn. And if people don't have LinkedIn, do you have an email they can contact you on?
I do. It's my name, Laura Gates Lupton @gmail.com.
Perfect. Thank you for joining me today, and everyone for listening. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.
Thanks, Suzanne.